Hello and welcome to my course Checkmating Pattern. My name is Viktor Neustroev and I'm a candidate master. In this lecture I will tell you about the structure of this course and what this course is about. Of course, according to the title, this course is about checkmating patterns. It teaches you to recognize such patterns during your own games. Chess is a visual game and a chess player must be able to recognize checkmating patterns. In order to give a mate, you should know standard mating patterns. They will save you time and energy. The reason why professionals find more combinations in less time than amateurs is that they have stored many patterns in their minds. In this course, we analyze such checkmating patterns as queen mate, rook and bishop mate, rook and knight mate, bishop and knight mate, smothered mate, two bishops mate, two knights mate, two rooks mate, also known as line mate, back rank mate, other mating patterns, and in the final section of the course I summarize them all. This course is well structured. Every mating pattern is shown consistently. First, you learn the pattern itself. Second, you train on puzzle examples. And third, you look at the game analysis and try to recognize this exact pattern in the game. After finishing this course, you will be able to complete the attack and to find checkmates during your own games more often. And I'm sure you will win more often. Thank you for your interest. Let's start to learn. Welcome back to my course Checkmating Patterns, and in this lecture I explain what you can get from the course. I designed this course for chess players who want to improve their ability to attack the enemy king and be able to find checkmates in the middle game more often. This course is recommended especially for students who don't always succeed in completing the attack. What exactly do I teach in this course? The course consists of the puzzles devoted to a certain checkmating pattern and game examples where this pattern was applied. What you will be able to do after the course? Of course, you will learn checkmating patterns and you will be able to recognize them during your own games. I believe you will checkmate faster and find checkmates more often during the games. At the same time, I think after passing this course you improve the overall quality of your chess games. And sometimes in some positions you will understand the fundamentals of these tactical strikes, which are devoted to the mating patterns that we are going to analyze here in this course. This course will also improve your tactical skills. I made this course interactive. During the videos, I ask you to pause the video and try to come up with your own solution in this or that position. Also, in some positions, you will find the best move more often, especially if you see that you attack on the king side and the enemy king has not enough defense. Let's go deeper inside the course. Welcome back to the course, but before we start learning the checkmating patterns, first I just want to give you a few pieces of general advice what to do when you calculate the lines, how to recognize the patterns, and so on. First, the knowledge of mating patterns is a bit of a help when you're trying to visualize a possible tactical strike against the enemy king. However, it's also important to keep in mind that you should also control the squares around the king with your pieces. That's why you shouldn't always stick to patterns, but calculate the lines accurately. The pattern only provides you with the direction for what to analyze, what to calculate. Sometimes the pattern becomes a reality earlier than defending player might have calculated it. That's why, to apply mating patterns successfully, you should also possess good calculation skills and even outcalculate your opponent, because miscalculations in such a case can result in mate. And when it comes to major piece combinations, don't forget to play h3 or h6 to create an escape square for your king. Sometimes it's unnecessary and loses a tempo, but this is how you prevent a back-rank checkmate later in the game. This is called a prophylactic move. And finally, when you are looking for a tactical combination, especially checkmate, try to keep in mind such a strange idea when you first visualize the final position and then look for moves that can lead to it. Okay, thank you for your attention, and now let's start the course. Hello, this is Candidate Master Viktor Neustroev, and welcome to my course devoted to mating patterns. And in this lecture, we will start this section which is devoted to patterns when you have your queen on the board, so we can call it queen mating patterns. You know, queen is the most strong piece. Look at this position. The queen can attack so many squares around the enemy king. Here you may notice that if only these two squares are attacked by our pieces or are occupied by enemy pieces, then it's a checkmate. This is what we are going to achieve when we try to give a checkmate to our opponent in the middle game or in the end game. Another example, here the queen attacks the king diagonally with the help of our king. And again, if only these two squares, e7 and f6, are occupied by enemy pieces or are under our piece's control, for example, the bishop can control this diagonal, then it's a checkmate. So now you understand how to give a checkmate with the queen. Let's now switch to the concrete examples where I can explain everything clearly. Okay, now please look at this position and tell me how to play. So here you understand that the queen checkmates the king and it's white's turn to move, where to go with the king. Of course, here king e2 is the best way, and after that it's not easy to give a checkmate for the king. However, black is better because he has a knight. But in the game it was played king to e4. With this move, white gave a chance to black to give a checkmate. How to give a checkmate now for black? You may pause the video and think a little bit. Okay, let's continue. Of course, queen c4. How to play with the king now? If king f5, then queen g4 is a checkmate. You see, again, the queen attacks the king diagonally, and these two squares, one of them is occupied, the other one is protected by the king or by the knight. That's why here the king goes to f3. Okay, how to play in this position for black to give a checkmate? Of course, queen f1. But in the game it was played queen d3, and then the king escaped, so however white lost the game, but this move gave white some chances. After queen f1, the king will be checkmated. So you see, there is no squares to move except e4. king goes to e4, then queen e2. Now the king has two options, to go to d4 or to capture the knight. And the other one is to go to f5, but then queen g4. This is what we already discussed. If he takes our knight, then queen c4 is a checkmate. These two squares are occupied by enemy pieces. If he goes to d4, then again we can give the same checkmate, queen c4. Now we also use the help of our knight, which controls this square, and this square is occupied by the pawn. All other squares are under our queen's control. Okay, this is the typical way to checkmate with the help of your queen. Sometimes you need not only queen but a few more pieces, like maybe a pawn, or maybe at least it's just enough to have a queen, but other squares where the king can move should be occupied by his own pieces. In the next lecture I will provide you with more difficult puzzles and give you the concrete examples. Thank you for your attention. Welcome back to the course. This is Candidate Master Viktor Neustroev, and we are talking about mating patterns. And this lecture is devoted to queen mate. Remember what I explained in the previous lecture, how the queen checkmates. In this position you may notice that these two squares are occupied by his own pieces. Okay, it's white to move and the task is to checkmate. If you want, you may pause the video, think a little bit, and then find the solution on your own. Okay, let's continue. How to checkmate here? We can play bishop f6. It's a double check. The only way to get rid of a double check is to move with the king. Here, black has two moves: to take the bishop and go to h6. If king goes to h6, then queen g5 is a checkmate. There are no more squares for the king. And if he takes on f6, then again we can play queen g5, and the bishop on e6 and the queen on f7 doesn't allow the black king to escape. That's a checkmate. The e5 square is occupied by the other bishop, or at the same time it is under attack of our pawn. How to find this combination? When you're looking for a mate, you'd better imagine that you already checkmated the king, and try to imagine this position in your mind, and then try to find moves to create this position. So imagine the final result, the final position, and then try to find the way to reach it. Okay, one more example for you. Look at this position again. The enemy king is in the center, so there is a bishop here, the pawn, but actually he has a few squares, c5 and c4 for example, where he can escape. So it's white to move in this position. How would you play and how to checkmate the king? It takes only two moves to checkmate. Of course there are a lot of checkmates in 3, 4, 5 moves, but only one move leads to checkmate in 2. What is this move? You may pause the video, think a little bit, and find your own solution. Okay, but we continue. Here the key move is rook to e4, check. How to play? Now black has so many options and our task is to calculate them all. King to c5, pawn takes on e4, bishop takes on e4, or king takes on e4. 4 options. Let's start with the bishop. Bishop takes e4. Then you see these two squares are occupied by his pawn and his bishop. That's why we play queen c3. That's a checkmate. So here the queen controls all the squares except these two, which are occupied by enemy pieces. What if now king takes? Then we play queen e3. And the d5 square is occupied by enemy pawn, while the f5 square is controlled by our bishop. What if pawn takes? Then we can give a different checkmate, so we play queen d6, and here our king controls the c3 and e3 squares. The bishop controls c4. The enemy bishop and the enemy pawn doesn't allow the king to get to e4. Here our queen controls not so many squares, just these 4. Okay, what if now king escapes immediately? Then we can play queen c7. And here these two pawns don't allow the king to go on the 5th rank. The rook controls the 4th rank, and the queen controls these two squares and also this file, the c file. That's a checkmate. And of course, if king takes on e4, then it's queen through action. We analyzed all these 4 options, and there is no way for black to get rid of this checkmate. Try to understand this key idea. Our task is to imagine the position where we can checkmate the enemy king with the help of our queen. For that, be sure that these two squares where the king can escape are not available for him. For example, they are occupied by his pieces, or they are attacked by our pieces. Okay, thank you for your attention. We will continue in the next lecture with more practical examples. Okay, thank you for your attention. We will continue in the next lecture with a game example. Hello and welcome to the course, which is devoted to mating patterns, and in this lecture I would like to analyze the game between Radzinski and Alekhine, played in Paris in 1913. Alexander Alekhine is playing for black. e4, e5, knight f3, d6, and bishop c4 was played here. However, you know, this opening is called filigree defense, and nowadays d4 is the most popular move in this position. Then e takes d4, knight takes on d4, knight f6 for example, then knight c3, and there are so many lines for white, but in filigree defense white is considered to be better. Doesn't matter what moves exactly he makes. However, I know that many grandmasters play this defense, and some of them play it very successfully. Okay, bishop c4, and Alexander Alekhine answered with knight to c6. What other option does black have in this position? What if, for example, bishop e6? Bishop takes on e6, pawn takes on e6, then d4. E takes d4, knight takes d4, attacking the pawn on e6, which is now a weakness. How to play? Now, here black has two options, queen f6 or e5. Well, let's start with queen f6. Then queen h5. g6. If, for example, here instead of g6, queen f7, then queen h3, taking the pawn on e6 from that side. king d7, just castle, and white is better because better pieces development and because of black's king's position. So here white's just continue developing his pieces, then open the position by initiating a pawn trade. So instead of queen f7, what if g6 here? Queen b5 check, knight d7, and here we take the pawn, rook b8, queen a7, because we need to protect the knight at the same time. Knight a7, then c3 to protect this knight. And well, the position is almost winning for white. So let's go back. Instead of queen f6, let's analyze what to do in case of e5. So knight a6 here, queen a7, queen h5 check, g6, and queen h3. Almost the same position, but our knight is already on e6. Knight f6. Knight c3, c6, castle, knight a6, developing the piece, but then f4. And again, white is much better, it's almost a winning position. This king can't castle, and white is going to open the position and join his other pieces to the attack. Okay, let's go back. It was bishop e6 move. What other options instead of knight c6 that was played in the game here black has? What if he plays knight f6, which is a bad move? Then, of course, knight g5, attacking the f7 pawn. d5, he takes on d5. Knight takes on d5, but then queen f3, double attack. And knight can't go back to f6, because if so, white takes on f7 with the knight. So here the only option is queen g5, but then bishop takes on d5 and two pawns are hanging. White is much better. So knight f6 is a mistake, of course. What else? What if c6? Then you see, black played only with the pawns. That's why it makes sense to open the position. d4, d5, e takes on d5. Then e4, taking the knight, knight e5, c takes on d5, and here queen h5, threatening to give a checkmate on f7. If g6, simply knight takes on g6. F takes on g6, queen e5 check, and then we win a rook on h8. And here if black takes our bishop, then we take the knight. If, for example, in this position he defends his king with the knight, then first we give an intermediate check on b5, then take the rook. And we will be up the exchange. What else? What if f5, which seems to be a really risky move? Then d4. F takes e4, knight takes e5, sacrificing the knight. But here, two options, to play d5 or to capture the knight. Let's start with d takes e5, then queen h5, check. So g6, queen e5, winning the rook. That's why king d7, queen f5, check. King c6, queen e5. And in this position, white sacrificed the knight, but he's much better. And the king has almost no chance to escape. c5 doesn't work in this position because d captures on c5 on this en passant move. What if d5 in this position? Then queen h5 check, g6, knight takes on g6, the pawn is pinned, knight f6 attacking the queen, but then queen escapes with a check. Bishop e7, knight takes on h8, d takes on c4, and then just simply knight to c3. And I believe we are able to save this knight. And again, white will be up the exchange. What if bishop e7 here? Then d4. E takes on d4, knight takes on d4, knight f6, knight c3. Here, again, we get the position from Philidor defense. I know that this position is playable, but it's slightly better for white. Okay, let's go back to the game. After bishop c4, it was knight c6 played. Let's see what happened then. c3, bishop g4. That's actually not a good move, because then white can, for example, play h3, bishop h5, d3, and then the knight goes to d2. The other option is to play d4 immediately. Then, for example, queen e7, bishop e3, knight f6, queen b3, knight d8, protecting the pawn and at the same time protecting the pawn on f7, knight to d2, g6, d takes e5, d takes e5, and h3. Here just white is better. His pieces are allocated better. He also gets more space. However, in this game, after bishop g4, it was played queen b3, which is actually a mistake. Queen d7 and knight g5, taking the pawn on f7. Here knight h6 was played, but what if instead of knight g5, white plays some other moves, for example, bishop f7. Queen takes f7. The idea of this sacrifice is to play queen b7, then to give a fork and simultaneously attacking two pieces. But then king d7. White takes the rook, bishop f3, and queen gets to f3. While the queen is so far, the enemy queen can attack the pawn and the rook, then capture the pawn on e4. So, for example, rook g1, queen e4, king d1, queen f3, check. If king c2, how would you play as black in this position? Then knight d4 or knight b4, any of these moves. So that's why here king goes to e1, but then just e4, with the idea to get the knight to e5. If, for example, rook g3 here, queen h1, king e2, knight f6, you see the bishop is protected, and we are threatening to play queen c1 and knight h5. If in this position, instead of rook g3, white plays knight to a3, then knight e5, black gets a winning position. So what to do? Queen e7, protecting the pawn on f2, because after knight d3, king goes to f1, and we can't play queen f2. The pawn is protected by the enemy queen. But so we can still win. Queen d1, king g2, knight f4. If king h1, then how would you play? Queen f4, and after rook g2, queen takes on g2, checkmate. That's why here king goes to g3. Then queen can take the rook, or we can play queen f3 and checkmate. Bishop e7. There are no more squares for the king. Rook g5. And queen h3 is a checkmate. If only in this position, white plays bishop f7, sacrificing the bishop, but then creating a fork, trying to get the material back. Black can sacrifice the rook, and then get his queen into the attack. Here, white loses the material or gets a checkmate. What if instead of bishop takes on f7, queen takes on b7 immediately? Then of course rook b8. Queen goes to a6. Rook b6 attacking the queen. Queen a4 and f5 here. Here black gets some counterplay for the sacrificed pawn. However, if white plays correctly, I believe he can defend this position and then realize an extra pawn. Okay, let's go back to the game. So it was knight g5 played instead of bishop f7 and queen b7. Knight g5, knight h6. How to play now for white? What if queen takes on b7? Then rook b8, queen a6, rook b6, queen a4, and bishop e7 with the initiative. The knight here is under attack. d4 protecting the knight with the bishop. E takes on d4, castle. f6, f3, and this position is unclear. Approximately equal for both sides, but any move can change everything. However, in the game here it was played bishop takes on f7. That's a mistake. Knight takes on f7, knight takes knight, queen takes on f7, and queen b7. That was the idea. King d7. Queen takes on e8. And what do you think? How here black can try to checkmate? What to do? He plays queen c4, threatening to give a checkmate on e2. Then f3. And I want you to stop in this position. If you were black, how would you play? You may pause the video and think a little bit. Okay, let's continue. Here, black played bishop takes on f3 to keep this diagonal open. If, for example, instead of this move, we play knight d4 with the same idea, threaten checkmate, then d3. Queen d3, c takes on d4, bishop f3, and instead of taking, now knight c3 can be played. Because if g takes on f3 here, then just bishop e7 wins. Bishop goes to h4, and at the same time you see the queen is under attack. That's the problem. So black loses the queen or gets a checkmate. So that's why here, in this position, after bishop f3, instead of taking, white can play knight c3, protecting the e2 square. Then, if bishop g2 attacking the rook, then white has two options. Bishop g5 and d takes on a5. So they both work. For example, d takes a5, bishop e7. Same idea, checkmate and attack on our queen on a8. Then e6 check. The only move is king e6, but then queen d5. After white trades the queens, there is no hope for a checkmate. Bishop g5 is another option. If, for example, bishop e7 now, then just queen takes on h8. Bishop g5, queen takes on g7 check. The bishop has to retreat. Queen g4 check. King d8 and simply king f2. This is how white escapes from a checkmate. So let's go back. What if after knight c3, Here black takes e takes on d4, then rook f1, bishop g2, and finally rook f7. If here the king goes to e6, it's queen d5, checkmate. And if in this position just bishop e7, then queen takes on h8. And black still can't play bishop h4 because this bishop is pinned. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that knight d4 in this position doesn't work, only bishop f3 should be played. So we are still threatening to give a checkmate on e2. That's why g takes on f3. Now this diagonal is open. Knight d4. What if c takes on d4? Queen c1, king e2, queen h1, d5, queen h2, king goes to d3, queen g1, protecting the pawn on a7, queen c6, king d8, and here black can force a draw by a perpetual check. Actually, this is how white should play. So after knight d4, he'd better just take. However, he played d3. Queen takes on d3. C takes on d4, and now the final move of this combination is bishop e7, attacking the rook and threatening to give a checkmate on h4. So in the game it was queen h4, then bishop h4, checkmate. So again, you see this pattern. The queen controls these four squares, and the bishop checkmates through this diagonal. Okay, that was an example how to checkmate with the help of the queen. Of course, some other pieces also help from time to time, and there are just a few examples when the queen can checkmate alone. Later in our course we will also analyze them too. And for now, thank you for your attention. We will continue in the next lecture with more examples.